Okay, Tash, let's talk about how search has changed and why podcasting has become really imperative for anyone who cares about visibility and showing up for their clients and prospects.
This just gets my geek side going so much. As you know, I have a data and analytical background. So for me, it's where are the numbers and what is important. So let's dive into the ecosystem right now and where search is evolving. So before we had Google, which was the number one search engine, and SEO was so important, and blogging and keywords. And I'm not saying it's not important, but we have more friends in that ecosystem now. Google has recently purchased YouTube. They also have a search engine called Gemini. And they also basically dominate the Google search engine. So it's 90% of search is there. And then with them owning these other tools, you'll notice when you search, what shows up at the very top of your search? Gemini. Then you get YouTube videos inside of your search for recommendations. And then you also get your other links and recommendations. So you really have to make sure that you're showing up in a lot of different areas right now to show up and be part of this system. And because they own that ecosystem, it's really crucial that you think about that in your strategy. And podcasting helps check all of those boxes in many formats. However, if you're not getting content multiplication with it, like we offer, you may not be actually touching them all. So let's dive into this a little bit. Let's talk about Google. Google is your intent search. Google allows you to search something and go to their site and get that blog information and know that those SEO and taglines and different things are all on there. And it's basically checking the box of content. However, AI is able to write a lot of this content right now. So in high trust industries, it's not enough in today's ecosystem to say that what is written here is true. So that's why we make it very clear to our clients that when they are posting that on Google, when people are searching you, you want your website to have a page specifically for your podcast and one specifically for blogging. So we provide that with every single package here so that it helps feed that ecosystem. And you not only get, your podcast on your page, and you also get that blog. It's continuing to feed that fire and make it more searchable on Google. Now, YouTube, how does it play into this whole ecosystem? Well, YouTube is where you get your engagement. And people want to see video nowadays. They want to know it's a real human, right? They don't want this AI stuff. They want quick, short little snippets. They want to gather information really fast. We work in a very high-paced environment. And it's really important that you have short form and long form content. Short form is used to grab somebody's attention, where long form is we drive people to your long form to build trust so they can listen to that full conversation. They can learn how you speak. And that's what clients are expecting nowadays. Because it's so important that you not only have a whole website, they want to know that you're real. They want to know what it's going to be like to work with you. And the best way to do that is through video because they can see you, they can hear you, they can relate to you, and you can build that trust quickly and effectively. Now, what's the third component? That is Gemini. Gemini, who again, owned by Google, gives you those AI-based answers. And the way that we have evolved search is so different. We go and we search something as if we're talking to a human. We want conversation. We crave that human side of things. And we want high-level, quick results where we don't have to go and sift through an entire website, try and find something. We want quick results. So that's where Gemini, it really, and ChatGPT and different AI tools will help with search because With YouTube, you have to put a transcript in there. It is going and it's able to connect to your YouTube, to your Google platform, scrape all of the information, capture your real conversations like we're searching, and pull them forward so that you are able to be found very quickly and organically. What does that also do? It helps your end user get the information they're actually looking for. So you know when people are watching your stuff and your content, it's found with intention. It's not just accidentally stumbled upon. They're asking those questions and you're showing up because they're searching for something very similar. Now, with all of this, why is it so important that in these different search platforms that you're consistently posting? Well, it takes time for that algorithm to trust you. The more you produce, the more you put out, the more it's your authentic voice, it starts to check off these boxes and say, yeah, that makes sense. This is real. This isn't AI. This is a real human. And it creates that authority, that trust, not only for your audience, but for the actual algorithm itself. So without being blunt, if you are not podcasting or creating video content and having these conversations and they're sitting there behind closed doors in meetings, you're not going to show up because that's the way the system is evolving today. And that is how search has evolved. And that is why it is so important that you can leverage these types of conversations and post them so that you can be found and you're not just relying on referrals and word of mouth or SEO. And that's why I love what we do here, because we stay on top of every single platform and why and how it's evolving to make sure that our clients get the absolute best results as quickly as possible.
So showing up consistently and feeding that algorithm, it's a little bit like being on a board, playing a game. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It is. You know, I love to use the game in Monopoly to reference this. Everybody knows Monopoly. Everybody knows that you want to gather as much property as possible. And that's what you're doing with our system. You are really collecting all the property. And if you're not doing this, you're not showing up on the board, or you can consider yourself stuck in jail and not collecting. But you want to make sure that when you are playing this algorithm game, I guess you could say, Google is essentially the banker. And they own a lot of that control over how you're seen, how you're found, how you're showing up. If you can think about it in that type of perspective, when you go out there and you start to add in each of these pieces and collect your properties, you put in, the Google aspect of things. Then you apply the YouTube side of it, short form, long form, AI search, and you start to please that algorithm. You're going to start to be able to put homes on there and build that trust. And if you can think of those houses like the trust, you start to build up your ecosystem more and more. And then when you're posting consistently on other platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and that whole ecosystem starts to connect. And if you can think of it like that wheel and spoke that we talk about so frequently of adding on all these different channels and getting that consistent exposure everywhere, you start to own it. You start to build hotels. You start to show up more. You become your authority in that space. And that's where you really start to see return on influence become return on investment, because you're there, you're being seen, and you're showing up. And if you're not doing that today in this game of Monopoly and you're not on the board, you're not going to be chosen. And they're not going to be picking you and paying for you. They're going to be paying for somebody else.
Tash, whenever I've played Monopoly, it's taken hours. Like, you could easily have a Monopoly marathon. And I think that's also why this game is such a perfect metaphor for this journey, because it takes time, doesn't it? Not just to fuel the algorithm, but to also build relationships. with your prospective clients. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So many times we've seen clients that they get into episode 6, 7. Is this working? Show me the traction. Show me results. They want this quick fix. Well, this isn't ads. It takes time. You have to grow that entire board. You got to put those houses on first, build the foundation. And once that foundation grows and you start to build up all your properties and you own all these different pieces, people start to pay for landing on those places, right? And then you start to see that return in investment. And depending on how frequently you are recording and how often you're posting is going to help with that frequency. If people are landing on certain things and they're having to pay rent because they landed on some of those properties that you're building up, what does that do for you? It fuels your ecosystem to be able to afford to move up to that next phase and say, hey, I want to record more often. It fuels it to be able to pay for that next level of service and move maybe from standard to core to premium, apply FAQ video content, do different things. But you have to start somewhere and you have to build the foundation. And you don't just give up on the game. If you just walk away from the game of Monopoly, you got to start something else completely fresh. This isn't a trend. This is something that has to grow with time. And if you want to beat the game, you have to continually keep putting in that effort. And it might take some minor setbacks. You might land on somebody else's, property and have to pay them for that mistake. Don't let that be your podcast that goes, oh, I wanted to try this instead. And, I want to pause. You want to make sure that you stay consistent and not have to pay for that trial and error of testing something else in the market. Keep on building on what you have so that you can really, truly have those hotels at the end of the day. And I cannot stress enough that it's whatever time you put in and the energy you put in is what you will end up getting back at the end of the day. The results are tenfold. We can do 80% of the work for you, but you got to make sure you hold yourself accountable for doing the 20. And when you do figure out how to do it at a base level and a foundational level, you're going to crave doing it at a core level and a premium level. When you see that first hotel land up there, do you think of how that made you feel? Like, oh, I got houses on all my properties. Now I have a hotel on there. You crave it more and more. You want to put hotels on all your other properties. So think about that as podcasting as an analogy, that's what you're craving and you're striving towards. This isn't just I'm going to start something and stop it. I'm going in there to put the time, the energy, and the growth into this type of a solution. And that's where I find that a lot of our clients too venture into the idea of starting a show and then saying, hey, I think I want to take this in-house and I want to do this on my own. And what are the risks of that, right? You could essentially be putting yourself in jail. You're rolling the dice and it's a very risky situation to put yourself in because we already know the strategy and we know exactly what steps you need to take to get to building those houses, those hotels. So if you try and do some of these things yourselves, we've produced over, I think we're at 1,250 unique episodes. This isn't our first kick at the can. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. We do this time and time again. And you trying to take something like this on, you could be paying the community chest over and over and over again and might end up back at that, let's start all over and have to rebuild again. And nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to start back at the very beginning. They want to keep on collecting. And if you don't keep on going and going through that board over and over again, you're not going to collect at the end.
Tash, when you mentioned about some people wanting to bring their podcasting in-house, I was smiling, but I was actually crying because I just think about it from the perspective of the marketing team too. So what does that do to your team's productivity and to the morale and culture when you're suddenly popping this whole other set of specializations, because it's a group of specializations that goes into podcasting. That's why when you work with us, you get a team of specialists. Well, now you want your marketing team, and sometimes that's just one marketing person. You want them to be that whole team of specialists for you. It just sounds like a recipe for burnout. And like you're saying, for suddenly quitting the game and losing all of that momentum.
And it makes me so sad to hear that, because I have seen that happen in full transparency. And I've seen people come back as well, and they didn't realize how much work this all is. And when you say an entire team, that's exactly what you get with ProudMouth, is a whole team of subject matter experts in every stage. So not only do you get a producer that helps create a really great product for you and be able to bounce ideas off of, you also have strategy within ProudMouth that allows you to pivot, shift, be agile, not be a one size fits all. And, you know, you don't have to play the guessing game of what resonates with people for your audience and what doesn't, where your team has to figure all of that out, you know. And then there's also coming up with all of the promo and all of the posts and all of that drainage, right? And posting it, staying frequent. And do you know what algorithm works and what doesn't work? You know, you get a beautifully edited product at the end. You get full content that is going to work on every social platform. And it's built for those specific social platforms that you already have. And then you also get, you know, the blogs that go with it, the newsletters that you can plug and play, and your marketing team can just take that little piece and apply it. It allows you to really focus more on what you do best, and we do what we do best. And that's smart spending, in my opinion. Very smart spending. When you think that you can hire somebody to just fit that one role and take it in-house, it's not fair. They're not going to be a subject matter expert in every single piece of that. I could never produce a show for somebody from start to finish. I know all of these pieces, but each person that touches your product along the way knows even more about that particular topic and really is a subject matter expert in that space. And they're always researching and identifying what's working and what's not and evolving that. So that's the other thing that I think is so cool with ProudMouth, is because the algorithm's changing and evolving so much, you'll see your content evolve and change and shape and shift to please it more so. So again, we've tested everything that we do on us first, on our own monopoly board, so that you don't have to go in there and test it out and potentially pay the banker, as opposed to, you know, putting up those houses in those hotels and really focusing on just growth, as opposed to trying things out and trial and error. So that's where I get really, really excited with the fact of what we do and understanding that it's a very, very long-term solution. It's not just let's test out a podcast. It's let's actually make sure that your whole solution has a strategy to it, and that we're considering every piece in that ecosystem of your marketing solution.